Good day, and welcome to our Answers weekly wraps. What we'll do, as usual, is cover three stories in the week that affects you and your investments, and then also look at wrap on the AI news of the week. Three stories this week are going to be UK inflation, then the Chinese economy, and finally we're going to wrap up with the South African MPC decision. In our AI segment, we'll cover what happened with Facebook with regards to their most recent model release, as well as a couple other things that have come out last week. Okay, let's start off with UK inflation. UK inflation came in a little lower than expected, still significantly higher than most places in the world. I mean, we had US inflation in the last count last week coming at 3%. UK inflation is just barely below 8%. But the market had expected slightly above 8%, so it was a bit of a better number than had been anticipated. The UK, for some reason, is the worst performing major economy when it comes to inflation, and by some measures, the worst performing major economy overall over the last couple of years. So it's the end of Brexit, basically. Also the end of the COVID pandemic. The Prime Minister is under a great deal of pressure, and I think at the moment, looking at what the UK is dealing with, it's indicative that even for a large economy like the UK, it's quite difficult to operate in a global environment when you have these mega blocks out there like China, like the EU, like the US. Indicative as well that maybe in Africa, that the idea that a country like Africa can go it alone, or a country like, for instance, even Nigeria might be able to go it alone, might be a bit optimistic. It calls for the need for greater cooperation, greater coordination, basically pulling your strengths in the modern environment in order to basically survive. But it's like the UK said, the UK is a much more powerful economy than South Africa. But since the Brexit, it's not being able to find its feet at the moment. The next thing is the Chinese economy. We have some Chinese numbers coming out with regards to their economic growth. A little lower than expected for the market, but above what the government was talking about. The Chinese economy is in a bit of a weird patch at the moment. They have come out of COVID later than everybody else because they employed, or they used that zero COVID policy a lot longer than everybody else did, and they did it in a way that was much more aggressive. For those that don't recall, we in South Africa may have, for instance, not had alcohol or hot pies at the shops. China welded people into their houses, welded the doors shut, literally. You had to get your food delivered to you. You weren't even allowed to go to your own balcony in an apartment, let alone basically onto the streets. That was the kind of thing we had in China. And that obviously had a huge impact on that economy, and they did it longer than anybody else, causing more damage. Since the end of the zero COVID policy, the economy has found it difficult to recover properly. And there's other signs that are happening in the Chinese economy at the moment that are really troubling. The Chinese property market is a bubble by all measures. Due to the nature of the Chinese financial system, due to some government policies out there, most Chinese people have put a lot of their money into property as the retirement policy, effectively. Doesn't work very well when there's a declining population. There's like 100,000 houses. There's 100,000 people right now, but in 10 years' time, there's going to be 90,000 people. 10,000 of those houses are not going to be viable. And that's what's happening in China right now. They have a declining population. They have a lot of money being spent, or has been spent in the past, on property. A very bad combination. And also the government, or Xi Jinping, in order to get the third term, has come out with rather draconian policies regarding any kind of opposition, including, minor criticisms from the tech sector. We all know what happened to Jack Ma, who made a very, very mild criticism of the Chinese system. And he disappeared for a few months. When he came back out, apologized to the government. And the last I heard, he's somewhere in Japan, basically keeping his head down. That is what happens to any kind of critic of the government at the moment. And that has meant that there's been a serious, cooling down of private sector activity there, because the best, private sector guys don't want to be in China anymore. They are losing out in terms of, entrepreneurship, etc., because people are worried about, the system that they're dealing with. At the same time, we are seeing a lot of pressure coming through from places like the US with regards to, exporting high-tech equipment to China. And, like I said, the Chinese economy is in a bit of a troubled situation at the moment. And how does it affect South Africa? Well, China is a huge demander of natural resources. With the Chinese economy under pressure, not performing up to the level that we would want it to be, we could see a bit of pressure coming through with regards to commodities, especially in South Africa. That being said, I do expect the Chinese government to do what they can in order to get economic growth up again. They're very sensitive to the idea that they are not growing as fast as they should be, and that means that they should be looking at more stimulus coming through. And China's a large economy. We're talking more than $1 trillion in total stimulus coming into the system in order to fight the slow economic growth, which would be quite a bit of stimulus to not just the Chinese economy, but the global economy as well. And then finally, we look at the MPC meeting. We also had our CPI number coming out this week, came out at 5.4. The expectation is like 5.6. It's a drop, to below the 6% upper limit of our target. In South Africa, we do what's called inflation targeting. So what we say is that we want the inflation rate to be between 3 and 6%. If it's below 3%, we'll do things to make it go higher. If it's above 6%, we'll do things to make it go lower. The Reserve Bank has also recently come out with the idea of wanting to target the mid-range, or midpoint of that range. So 4.5% is the ideal inflation rate in South Africa. Now, dropping below 6% means that the Reserve Bank is not under as much pressure typically to actually raise rates because it's well below 5.4, is well below 6%, indicating that we are well within the range of the target range effectively. And we saw that come through the MPC meeting where there was no change with regards to the interest rate. The rand will weaken a little bit on the news, but I think that was to be expected. Before the announcement was made, roughly 3/4 of people believed that there would be no hike, and a quarter believed that would be a hike. And so they get no hike, even though the majority were right. The people that were not right were the guys who were expecting a higher number, and therefore usually in that scenario you find the currency does weaken. But speaking of inflation in South Africa, there's a couple of things to point out. Firstly, we are seeing signs that the brief positive period around Eskom being able to supply almost as much energy as we needed, that seems to be gone away a bit. We are seeing prolonged increases again in load shedding. We are seeing at the moment 4s and 3s, and a couple of times when weather gets cold, it's up to 6s. That's not a sustainable way to be functioning to have a growing economy. We also are seeing continued weakness in the rand. 1790, 1810, that kind of level is pretty bad for the rand. We need to be seeing the rand going a little stronger than this year, hopefully towards something like the 1750 and below levels, in order to just take away some of the extra inflation being imported into the country. At the same time, if you look internationally, we are seeing oil prices starting to find some footing again, which is quite bad for a country like South Africa, which does import basically most of its petroleum. We do have Sasol making some stuff out of coal, etc., but we're not a petroleum producing country, so we have to basically import that. And when the costs are higher for that means there's an input cost that's higher across the entire economy, which also increases inflation. I do suspect that the next rate decision from the Reserve Bank will be a hike, just because of the fact that the US is probably going to hike almost certainly in the next rate decision that comes up very soon basically, and we will have to kind of follow that. We really can't miss hiking when the US does hike. So we were lucky that this was before the next US rate decision, and so we can have our own path. But when the next decision from the US comes out and they do hike, we'll probably have to hike in our next meeting as well. Coming to our AI roundup, what we're looking at is a couple bits of news. Firstly, out of Meta/Facebook, they've released a new open source version of their program, Llama. Now, Llama used to stand for Large Language Model, Meta, something like that. And it was spelled a little differently. I think two capital L's at the start. This new model is spelled like the word llama, like with the animal, normal L's at the start. What's interesting about Meta's model is a totally different model in terms of the business model behind it than what we are seeing from, OpenAI, Microsoft, or Google, and other players out there. In as much as they are releasing their model to the public, and the public is supposed to be building, something on that. So why is this important? Well, historically, this has actually been a very smart thing to do in the tech space. What it does allow you to do as a tech company is it allows you to actually go out and kind of colonize the brain power of the world. So young people that can't afford maybe to get access to another expensive model, the ChatGPT, model, if you want to get access as a young person or an entrepreneur to it, because it costs you a bit of money. But if you don't have that money, you don't have the ability to put the capital down initially, or you're just some young person wanting to play around with the model, it's very difficult to access something from OpenAI. But if you have access to Llama, you can learn to use that. You can do things with it. You can innovate with it, etc. And that brain power gives you these other effects that historically have been very positive. The example I would use, for instance, is look at IBM versus Apple. Now, obviously, IBM is much less valuable than Apple right now, but that wasn't initially the case. And why was that? One of the reasons for that was what we had was IBM let loose its IP into the world, and the PC became the default platform for personal computers as opposed to the Mac. Apple kept control of its IP, and obviously, and later on it worked out really well with regards to the iPhone, etc. But when it was just a PC company, with just a computer company, sorry, before the invention of the iPod and the whatever, it almost went bankrupt. So that's one interesting thing. And we've also seen that happen, for instance, with the Android from Google. And understand that Facebook has made a living from giving stuff away for free and making money off it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have some smart business plan behind the scenes that they can use to somehow monetize this free gift to the world of Llama. The second thing I want to point out is that Google slash Alphabet, what we will call it right now, is really coming back into the running when it comes to the AI space. Firstly, it's out there with regards to ChatGPT with Bard, really improving Bard with offering multimodality where you can actually have a picture and you can ask questions about a picture, etc. Whereas ChatGPT is not rolled out to the world yet, Google is virtually doing that to the world. ChatGPT is only giving out to a few select clients. The next thing is that apparently the next thing they're coming out with is something called Gemini. Is going to be trained on a new kind of technology. And one thing to understand is that everything that we have so far is based on Google's technology around the transformer. They gave that out to the world for free. And then ChatGPT was built on that by OpenAI. Claude, all those other guys basically came in and they built their systems using the technology that Google has developed. Google has a history of developing things in the AI space that are usually much more advanced than others. If this trend continues, we could be seeing things from Gemini that are, who knows what they could be able to do. That's significantly different and significantly more capable than some of the other models we have out there. And one, final thing I want to end up with at the moment is just looking at ChatGPT. Studies have come out and talked about the fact that apparently the current version of ChatGPT is dumber than it was a few months ago. Somehow GPT-4 has gotten stupider over the last couple of months than it was a few months ago. Why? There's a couple of reasons behind this. Maybe they are optimizing the algorithm to try and reduce the amount of power the system uses, and that's like reducing results. Another thing is that apparently the training data that they're getting in from consumers is meaning that they are better, able to answer questions based on the prompts you give. So if you give a very complicated prompt, very in-depth prompt, that's going to give you a better answer than if you give just a simple prompt, because they maybe finding that people that give simple prompts don't want the full answer, they want some summary answer. And whereas somebody gives a more complicated, like a prompt that shows more understanding, wants the more difficult answer, more complicated answer. That could be the thing there. But for whatever reason, GPT-4 is getting a bit weaker. And the final thing that they might be causing the weakness is apparently one of the ways in which they're changing the program at the moment is to increase safety. So GPT-4 can't say the kind of stuff it was saying a few months ago because it's obviously been restricted into not make it as liable to say something offensive as it was in the past. And what's interesting about this is that if that is the cause, that means that having censorship, having that restriction on the computer system significantly reduces its ability, its capabilities, which indicates that maybe Elon Musk's XAI approach of having a system that is not going to be hampered by that could be quite powerful, because it could mean that if you have two systems of reasonable similar size and whatever digital capacity, and one is censored and one is not, the uncensored one is probably going to be more valuable. Okay. That's it for the week. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward again to seeing you guys next week. Cheers.